Hi all, I have another interesting game to show you from the Norway tournament 2017. Vladimir Kramnik playing against Magnus Carlsen in round 7. We have e4 from Kramnik, e5, and we go into a Gokyo piano. It's when black plays bishop c5. This position here is Gokyo piano. We have c3. This is the main move. Knight f6. d3, this is the main way of playing it, not d4. d4 is only offering equality. It has been played a bit, but actually, you know, black just takes and plays this annoying check, and white's best is to play bishop d2, and we get a kind of equal-ish position like this, for example, sometimes. So d3 is the best way of playing it, just supporting that pawn. d6. Now black plays a6, giving the bishop the a7 square if needed, because sometimes the bishop's even kicked with b4 as well as d4. Rook e1. Now this is a bit of a departure, believe it or not. Lightbook indicates bishop b3. The rook is usually left here, guarding f2. The rook's usually left there. Here is a more popular continuation, where actually you see that the rook, it's only here that it's moved. There's over 600 games of the rook moved here. So that's just those interested in the nuances here. This position's been seen quite a few times. There's even 62 games from here. So yeah, what's the idea of moving the rook? Does it make any big difference? Well, let's see. We see bishop a7 here, which is the main move. And now actually to transpose to a lot of games is bishop b3. We see a4, keeping the game fairly distinctive for the moment. h3. Now this is pretty standard looking stuff to transfer the knight over here. That f4 square is eyed with a knight on g6. d4, knight g6. Knight bd2, c6, bishop d3. So that's in advance of any potential d5 here, perhaps. You could argue rook e8, bishop c2, h6, knight f1. So white is actually also potentially mirroring black a little bit. If he has a knight on g3, you would see four knights looking at each other. Black takes on d4 now, releasing some central tension, and plays c5. And after d5 we have a kind of Benoni pawn structure with some of the characteristics of a Benoni. With d5 this diagonal is kind of opened up. There isn't a fianchettoed bishop though. There's usually in the Benoni fianchettoed bishop, there's more of a snake Benoni where the bishop is crawling around dark squares, and there's no fianchetto here. But still there's a potentially vulnerable pawn here. There's still a pawn majority on this side of the board. Black's play is usually on the dark squares. We see b5, so black's already interested in trying to make use of the pawn majority. Takes, knight g3. And the light squares are usually more important for white against the Benoni generally. Bishop d7, bishop e3. This ties down this pawn for a moment to the bishop. Bishop b6, kind of unpinning the pawn just in case c4 but is wanting to be played. But also the rook now is offered. That's taken actually. And this pin is used here, b4, against this pin bishop here. And with the idea of queen a1 coming up, queen a7 unpinning, so now black threatens either to take or c4. Queen a1, repinning the pawn, so the pawn can't move without losing a piece here. So we have actually queen c7. So now again, either c4 or c takes is possible. But there's a curious little nuance in this position with the queen on a1. I wonder if you can spot it. I'll give you a clue. The queen on a1 is doing something quite interesting, as well as controlling the a8 square, by the way. There's no way of black to easily contest the a file immediately now with rook a8 at the moment. But there's something else the queen is doing. Can you guess what white plays here? You might find this a shocking move. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. Okay. The move is bishop takes h6. Yeah, there's a tactic on f6 here. Now c takes b4 is taken. If inviting the queen to f6, this is a bad idea, because here knight h5, and if queen takes, we have knight takes f6, and if the queen doesn't take, then termination with queen g7. So that's very unpleasant. Yes. So here actually c takes b4, and now another great interesting move. What does white play in this position? If I give you 5 seconds. Okay. The move is bishop takes g7. Yeah, you might wonder, well, why can't king takes? Well, because of knight h5 check, using that pin from afar. And here it's horrible for black. Taking the best move here to avoid losing the bishop on c2 with check is king f1. And this is really annoying now. After takes knight g5, threatening mate. This is more than just annoying, it's losing for black. Because now if knight takes, there's queen h8, checkmate, and there's a threat of knight takes g6. This position doesn't help black, for example, like that. So that is a way of losing quickly to take here. So instead queen takes c2, we have queen takes f6. And now the best way for black to take on f2 is actually bishop takes f2, but Magnus didn't play this. After king h1, black can actually be okay here. For example, this position. Well, no, not like this. In this position, black has to play queen c3 to avoid getting terminated on g7. And if e5 here, trying to interrupt things, knight takes is good. And if rook e2, bishop takes g3, and there's a key move here. This is a bit pyrotechnical, but there's a key defensive move in this position which might theoretically hold the balance. Can you guess? It's bishop f5. Apparently this holds the balance technically. For example, taking, we can have an equalish position like that. Not good enough really is queen takes, because here actually white has an advantage still. For example, like this, the dark squares are actually quite good for white. Yeah, white can actually make some inroads and forcibly win a piece, as an example variation. So anyway, but in a nutshell, bishop takes f2 is the only way, it seems, from a technical perspective, for black to play this. So yeah, king h2, just run this through again. So not bishop takes e1, that's just losing to bishop h6, because then after queen c3, to stop queen g7 mate, we can play e5, and after bishop takes g3, the checks kind of run out for black. So yeah, the only way of playing it, if this is the continuation, is to play queen c3 here. It's tricky stuff. Okay, it's very, very tricky stuff, but in the game we see queen takes f2 check, and now yeah, termination is threatened with bishop h6 and queen g7. We see bishop d8, which is a bit of a concession. Queen takes d6, which is hitting d7 now. Knight h4. If king takes g7 here, this is just better for white because of knight f5 coming in. So for example, well, as an example, either queen g4, well, with knight f5 coming in, it's just really unpleasant. It's crushing, even e6 as well. So basically, yeah, knight h4 threatens mate here on g2. That's an interesting move. It's just taken, bishop takes, threatening a few things. Knight h5 getting out of the way and protecting the bishop. Now here, bishop takes h3 is played, threatening mate again. So Magnus is not leaving Vladimir alone here. If he leaves Vladimir alone for one move, it's pretty fatal. Queen h6, threatening mate, and also knight f6 is nasty as well. But the major one is mate in 1, and if f6, bishop takes f6, this is just horrible for black. There's no easy way of defending this. If rook e7, queen h8, this is a forced mate, queen g7, queen e7, queen takes e7. So how does actually black defend this? If bishop takes f6, queen g6 is the way here, and a forced mate. So this is yeah, so it's pretty desperate for black. This is probably the only move to stay in the game. Rook g1 is the best reply, it seems, still with the threat of queen h6, the major threat. Bishop g5 parries that. Bishop f6, so bishop takes g5, clearly threatened. Bishop g4 counter-attacking white's knight. Bishop takes g5 is played, bishop takes, but now queen h6, and we're back to termination stuff with bishop f6 being threatened, terminating by checkmate on g7 or h8. And it's here, I don't know, black's in big trouble here. Big trouble on the dark squares. What does Magnus do? If he plays bishop g6, that actually does interrupt f6, but actually there's a different way of skinning the cat here. Can you see what white could play in this position? If I give you 5 seconds. Okay, it's only the queen protecting f6. We have d6 here, threatening immediately d7. If the queen moves to support that, it can stop that and stop bishop f6. We still play d7, forcing the queen away from f6. Now here, check, we have e5, and that's the end of that. Because queen f8 is insufficient. Queen h8 checkmate. Yeah, it's all pretty nasty stuff here for bishop f6, and in conjunction with this pawn. Pretty unfortunate. A lot of things for black to juggle here. So plays probably the only move to stay in the game a bit longer, sacrificing the bishop. Now if bishop f6, then rook h4, funny enough, is checkmate for white. Aha. So no, he took the bishop, yep. Queen f5 pinning for a moment, queen h6 unpinning, and renewing the threat of bishop f6. b3, bishop f6, check to avoid getting mated, but white now plays d6. Yeah, very, very cruel point here. There's probably other ways of playing it. Rook d1 is just the same effect. This position, it's impossible to stop the pawn. So let's have a look at the game continuation, d6 immediately. It's just impossible to stop the pawn. The pawn does not want to go. We want to use Tarash's rule here. Now, I've mentioned Tarash's rule, which is, I hope you remember, rooks behind pawns, because otherwise d7, it's all thrown away after rook d6. No, you have the rook behind the pawn, and there's no way for black to defend that. You know, what happened here was check, king g1, game end. There's no way of defending against d7 and d8. You know, if king f8, so Magnus resigned, king f8, d7, and we just queen, supported by the rook. Yeah, so it's -2 for Magnus at the moment. Yeah, no wins, and the others draws. So the other games of his drawn. So he's not having the best performance ever, but it's only 2 losses. I mean, it's not majorly detrimental to his rating, because this is like the strongest tournament ever. It's like average rating approaching 2800. So it was always going to be a difficult tournament. So Vladimir Kramnik navigated a bit better the tactical situation, but it did require, it seems, some extreme precision for black to hold the balance with this bishop takes f2 as mentioned in the analysis of earlier. Anyway, I hope you got something from that. Comments, questions, like and shares appreciated. Thanks very much.